Good morning, and welcome to All People's Church Unitarian Universalist. As you can tell, I am not Rain Brady. My name is Marianne Clark, and I am your co-celebrant this morning. Rain's daughter, Isabel, has been sick for several days, so Rain is home with her. Please keep both of them in your hearts and hope that they will be back with us soon. In the pulpit today is Dr. Kendra Weddle, who is currently serving as scholar in residence at North Haven Church in Dallas. She is especially interested in the intersections of faith and feminism and in working for justice as faith in action. Kendra is a frequent guest in our pulpit. We're always happy to have her, and we're very happy to welcome her back this morning. Our Sunday service is a shared time for worship for all present as we gather for music, spoken words, a time of reflection and inspiration as a religious community. Let us come together in a spirit of compassion and respect for ourselves and others attending this service. We especially welcome those who are visiting today. If you haven't yet done so, please sign in at the visitors table by the front door, where you can be placed on our mailing list to receive weekly emails and the monthly newsletter. Before we continue on to worship, there are a few announcements. First, it's Potluck Sunday, yay! We invite everyone to join us for lunch. Whether or not you brought anything, everybody is welcome, and we hope that you will stay and join us. And next week is the choir concert. Yay! So please join us. The choir has been working on it furiously, and we're looking forward to it. Are you an aspiring co-celebrant? Are you interested in learning more about being a co-celebrant and participating in the weekly worship service? Training will be held in the sanctuary today after potluck. We would love to see you there. Please settle now for our opening music.
Thank you, Misha. Our opening words this morning come from Reverend Gretchen Haley, and this is entitled On Claiming This Time for Renewal. Though you have been warned and given plenty of explanations, reasons to do otherwise, you have persisted, to claim a life of joy and justice, and to carve out this time for renewal of your own heart, despite the din demanding your attention, luring you towards fear and cynicism. You persist with gratitude for this day, for this life that has been given this chance to begin again, despite all of the forces of fragmentation, the disappointing ways we fail each other, fail ourselves. We must refuse to let grief undo us or to let our dreams get lost along the way. In spite of all of the evidence, we keep showing up at the edge of our own longing, and then we keep going, remembering this duty we have to life, in a greater sense, this duty we have to each other, to our children and their children. This hope that is also a choice we make, this promise we fight for, to persist in kindness, persevere in compassion, and prevail in a life that is bound entirely to love. Come, let us worship together.
We now invite you to stand as you are willing and able for our chalice lighting, our opening hymn, and our affirmation. Our chalice lighting words are from the Reverend Scott Taylor. We light this chalice to remember that it is good to make space for breath, that work is not the measure of worthiness, that filling one's life to the brim leaves no room for grace and surprise to slip in. Welcome, friends. Let us make space and be renewed. Our opening hymn is the hymn of the month for June, number 108 in the gray hymnal, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. And our affirmation, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in freedom, to seek others in freedom, serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. The young and the young of heart are now invited to come forward for our time for all ages here at the front of the chancel. Do we have any kiddies this morning?
We're all young at heart this morning.
I think we're all young at heart. I think you're right.
I would like to pass out a few rocks to those who might like to feel them. Now, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to take some students to the island of Iona. And while we were there, we spent some time along the beach looking for rocks. Now, make sure you pass those around, share with your neighbor. I only brought enough for those up front, so you'll need to share some. These are rocks that came from that excursion. And I have to tell you that we spent probably, I don't know, an hour and a half, maybe at least, looking at rocks. And so as you hold it in your hand, take in the color, feel it. Some of them are very smooth, some of them a little less smooth. We got to just look for the ones that would maybe make our hearts sing. And so I picked up a few of those and brought those home as a reminder of that feeling of wonder, just to be in this place and to be taken in by something as simple as a rock. And so I want us to think about this morning those ordinary things that can lead us to wonder, and how wonder can change our perspective so much that it changes our experience of the world. Let's sing our song following that. Exactly. And I can pick those up later.
It's hymn number 414, as we leave this friendly place. Except we're not leaving.
The text I want to share with you this morning comes from Mary Oliver, the poet so many of you know and appreciate. And this poem of hers is entitled Whistling Swans. Do you bow your head when you pray? Or do you look up into blue space? Take your choice. Prayers fly in all directions. And don't worry what language you use, God no doubt understands them all. Even when the swans are flying north and making such a ruckus of noise, God is surely listening and understanding. Rumi said, "There is no proof of the soul." But isn't the return of spring and how it springs up in our hearts a pretty good hint? Yes, I know, God's silence never breaks, but is that really a problem? There are thousands of voices, after all. And furthermore, don't you imagine, I just suggest it, that the swans know about as much as we do about the whole business? So listen to them and watch them, singing as they fly. Take from it what you can.
Our offertory words this morning are from Erica Hewitt. The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our nation. Each Sunday, we take half of the non-dedicated cash offering that is received and share it with a local organization whose values and goals reflect our own. This quarter, we are supporting the Texas UU Justice Ministry, a statewide justice ministry that raises the voice of Unitarian Universalist values in the public arena and seeks to have those values enacted into legislation and to public policy. Please give generously. Thank you, Misha. We are so lucky to have him. And now you all get to be the choir. So please stand and sing our next hymn, number 352 in the Great Book, Find a Stillness. Please be seated. In this time, when we seek a connection with all that is our life, we do so that we may give a place for the great questions of our lives, for our longings and our celebrations. As a religious community, we covenant to share both our joys and our sorrows. Each week, there is a journal outside the entrance to the sanctuary where you can write a message of hope or memory before the service. We honor these messages by lighting 3 candles next to our chalice. Also, at any time during our service, you are welcome to come forward and light a candle in our meditation center here at the side of the chancel. In the book of Memory and Hope, this morning, we have nothing. I hope that is good news. We pause at this time to hold and honor the sorrows and celebrations among us, including those deeply felt but left here unspoken. Let us pause for a moment of silent meditation, and then Misha will lift our hearts with music.
I love my local library. I go there multiple times a week picking up a book that they've retrieved from another library because I don't know what it is, but I always want ones that come from somewhere else because they're not on the shelves there. But still, they'll get it for me, so I just have to be patient, and then it comes, and I love that. In the last several years, I did notice that there is this increasing leniency for keeping books too long. Like there's not, you don't have to pay a fine for that anymore. Now, as a child, I can remember being frightened by the possibility that I would be fined for not returning a book by its due date. And maybe you remember those days. And it wasn't easy for my family to get to the library because it was 30 miles away from our family farm. And so we had to plan ahead for trips to town, and we didn't just go to return my library books. So I had to keep track of due dates and make sure that I would be able to finish the book by the time that it was due. There were a few times that I was late, and then I had to pay the fine out of my little piggy bank, which was actually a lion. But still, it was devastating. But now it seems as if there's no compulsory action, right? The library sends me an automatic email that my book is due, but they've gone ahead and renewed it anyway. But still, every once in a while, I do get that note telling me that for a particular book, there is no possibility for a renewal, and I need to return it. So this whole process of renewing my library books got me to wondering about the idea of renewing our bodies and minds and spirits. And specifically, what can I do when that renewal period is actually over? What do I do when it feels like the possibilities for renewal have been exhausted? When, having rebounded from disappointment or despair time and time again, I reach the point where I feel like there's no more opportunity for hope? Or when does it feel like the message from God or the universe or the world or my community just doesn't come? So I decided to look up renewal. What does it mean anyway? And here's just a little bit of what I found. One, it can mean to begin or take up again, as in an acquaintance or a conversation, to resume something. It can also mean to make effective for an additional period. So, for example, to renew a lease. It can also mean to restore or replenish, like to renew a stock of goods. Some of the synonyms for renewal include mend, reinstate, regenerate, rejuvenate, or how about this, recreate. So we could go lots of different directions with this idea. But it does strike me that all of these require our intention. In other words, I have to do something in order to experience renewal, to be rejuvenated, to return to the newness that once was, to wonder again. I think there are any number of ways to cultivate the potential for renewal. And maybe after our service this morning, I might get to talk with a few of you to hear what some of yours are. So for now, let me share maybe 4 that kind of came to my mind. 4 ways to maybe experience renewal, to cultivate that feeling of wonder. A philosopher once said, "Tell me to what you pay attention, and I will tell you who you are." So let me confess right here and now that who I am this week was someone whose anxiety level was increased because I had succumbed to the incessant news cycle, the one tied to a courtroom in New York City. And despite the outcome, it did me and my spirit absolutely no good. How can we feel renewed if we allow our attention to be given over to perspectives that do not have the potential to birth renewal in us? If all we do is immerse ourselves in the stories of people doing bad things to each other and to the planet, we will sink under the weight of a lopsided story. We will feel alone and outnumbered when really there are so many people doing wildly, imaginatively kind and brave things. Author Elizabeth Lesser suggests that we can break the cycle that keeps us from being renewed by changing what we pay attention to. So she encourages us to learn to consume a wisdom diet, one where we limit our exposure to one bad news story after another, and instead seek out hopeful stories. An example she introduces her readers to is Antoinette Tuff, a bookkeeper at an Atlanta elementary school who prevented a mass shooting by staying in a small room and calmly communicating with a 20-year-old gunman, even though she had several opportunities to escape. For more than an hour, she spoke to him from her heart, persuading him from using his loaded gun on the hundreds of children just right outside the room. Later, when she was asked how she had done what she did, Mrs. Tuff said that she practiced something she called anchoring. First anchoring in one's inner strength and then letting empathy and compassion lead the way. I just let him know he wasn't alone, she said. I kept saying, "Baby, we don't want you to die today. You belong to us. Just put your guns down." And he did. Whereas stories that end in violence perpetrate the false need to give our lives over to finding out what happens next, it often feels like this kind of story, these stories of differences kind of hit the news cycle and then are gone. In a flash, we forget them. So we just need to change our perspective and pay attention to these wisdom stories and let them linger for us. Let me suggest a second thing we can do for renewal is to be open to ordinary experiences that can become something more. Looking for a rock on a beach. Author Catherine May, in her book called Enchantment, tells about her grandmother's lunchtime ritual of sitting down to eat an orange. Her grandmother would settle into her chair, placing a square of kitchen paper across her lap. She took the orange and massaged it, working it between her fingers until the skin lifted from the fruit. Only then did she pierce it with her thumbnail and then slowly peeled the skin away. May says this was the closest she ever saw her grandmother doing something that resembled prayer. She didn't think of it that way as a child, but now she can see how this commonplace, ordinary thing, eating an orange, became extraordinary. In her memory, she can see how this was sacred space. The relative darkness of the room, the spritz of an orange oil rising against the light streaming in from the window, the smell of citrus filling the air. Religion scholar Mircea Eliade coined the term hierophany, higher, holy, phany, manifestation, hierophany, holy manifestation. He coined this term to describe the way that the divine reveals itself to us, transforming objects through which she works. When we make a tree or a stone or a wafer of bread the subject of worshipful attention, we transform it. into a hierophany, an object of the sacred. It's the experience of perceiving all the layers of existence, not just on the surface. The person who believes, be it either in an ancient animism or a complex modern religion, lives in an enhanced world, having been given the eyes to see, the ears to hear. All nature is capable of revealing itself to us this way. I think maybe a third suggestion I have for you is to read memoir, especially memoirs of people from faith traditions that perhaps you are less acquainted with. I know I've mentioned to you before the memoir of Simran Jeet Singh, the book, The Light We Give. And I still highly recommend his memoir. He's from the Sikh tradition, and I'm guessing that for many of us, that's not a tradition with which we're very familiar. And besides that, he grew up in San Antonio, so he's a Texan, so we have a connection. Now, Simran Jeet Singh is a scholar of religion. He's also the executive director for the Aspen Institute's Religion and Society program. In 2020, he was one of Time magazine's 16 people fighting for a more equal America. So you can hear he has an important voice and a message for us. In his book, The Light We Give, he explores Sikh values of oneness, love, justice, service, equality. And it's his emphasis on actions as integral to faith that really give his memoir its appeal. Reflecting on the importance of practice, he explained, we can believe anything. We can preach anything. But what truly shapes our character is what we practice. So he began a daily practice of gratitude in order to cultivate tangible acknowledgement of the idea that everything is divine. We all know that true happiness comes from within, he writes. What we may not realize, though, is that it doesn't come on its own. We create joy by making it a daily, intentional practice. You also can't go wrong if you wanted to pick up Elaine Pagel's memoir called Why Religion? Now, she's a leading academic in the field of religious studies as well, and she asks what purpose religion serves today, and she engages that question with her own personal narrative, one that takes a sense of urgency when her young son died, and the following year, so too did her husband. It's a provocative and moving account of dealing with loss, while also examining how religion can open us up to deeper and more spiritual dimensions of being human. Now, my final suggestion, at least for today, comes from returning to the library and observing the reason that eventually we do finally run out of opportunities for religion and for renewal and actually have to take the book back. Surely the reason for that is so that others can read it too. In other words, we're not on some solitary existence, although sometimes sure it feels that way. But we are called to share, and we need to share. And it's not just because we want to be gracious and hospitable, but because we need each other at a fundamental level. To be human is to be together, to recognize and to cultivate our connections. Now, I know that you have experienced your deepest feelings of satisfaction when you helped somebody else. Maybe it was loaning them a shovel so that they could plant a tree. Or perhaps it was in the last couple of weeks when maybe you shared some food because your neighbor's electricity was out. Or maybe you simply sent a text to make sure that your neighbor was okay following the storm. Maybe you picked up some strewn branches. Whatever it was, this giving over to each other of time and of attention and of care is what builds our communities and generates all kinds of good things in our brains. We all get a boost from it. So maybe we can do more to cultivate wonder and enchantment. Another way of saying we can experience renewal. So let's change our attention and focus on the positive, hopeful stories. Be wiser consumers of our news and news cycles. Let's be open to the ways in which the ordinary around us can become extraordinary. It doesn't happen to be an orange, but it could be something just as simple. A walk, sipping a cup of coffee while watching that new butterfly open her wings. Read memoirs. Step into someone else's story and learn something new about how their faith works for them. Or perhaps most important, look for ways to connect with others. Not only will you be offering them the goodness of humanity, your actions will rejuvenate you, calling your higher self to the higher ways of living. So let's return together to those words of Mary Oliver. Do you bow your head when you pray, or do you look up into that blue space? Take your choice. Prayers fly in all directions. And don't worry about what language you use. God, no doubt, understands them all. Even when the swans are flying north and making such a ruckus of noise, God is surely listening and understanding. Rumi said, "There is no proof of soul." But isn't the return of spring and how it springs up in our hearts a pretty good hint? Yes, I know God's silence never breaks. But is that really a problem? There are thousands of voices after all. And furthermore, don't you imagine, and I just suggested, that the swans know just about as much as we do about the whole business? So listen to them. Watch them singing as they fly. Take from it what you can. Amen. So let's stand and sing our closing hymn together. It's hymn number 114, Forward Through the Ages.
As we come to the end of our service, may you depart from our time together buoyed by the Spirit of life, delighted by the warmth of our gathering, and renewed in soul and mind. As we extinguish the flame of our chalice, may its lingering spark be carried in your heart until we are together again.
This morning, I looked out my window, and the very first bright red hibiscus flower opened. Isn't that wonderful? Let's go forth from here and seek